Everyone, and welcome to this week's Monday Memo. Now, most week I'm recording podcasts with guest mentors, and this week I was actually interviewing a senior finance professional who had also happened to run his own business, and it got me thinking that nowadays, in most large enterprises, managers and leaders are also supplementing their own accounting and finance training by undertaking, say, an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. And interestingly, whilst, on courses like an MBA, you're learning skills to go run a business successfully, the fact remains is that most MBA graduates, even those with finance backgrounds, will then not necessarily go off to start their own business out on their own. They'll instead take up a middle management or senior management finance position within an existing company. So then the question is, I guess, really is what's better? Is it getting an MBA education, or is it better education actually from running your own business? And I look at this in maybe two aspects. I think both can actually be useful, but the difference actually comes down between making a choice on two different paths, right? So one, the MBA one, is like an administrative journey. The other one, running your own business, is more of an entrepreneurial one. And the education, I suppose, from undertaking an MBA is like akin to becoming an administrator who focuses on how to get the most out of existing models, tools, techniques. Whereas I suppose an entrepreneur is more like an alchemist who starts with a mindset of combining like various different approaches, putting them together, mixing them around and seeing what works to create more value for customers and stakeholders. So in effect, you've got the case where administration is sweating existing approaches, whereas alchemy is about conjuring something up out of value that's in effect a new way of doing things. And then in terms of our finance world, if you're approaching it with an MBA mindset, you're most likely involved in deconstructing, say, an organization's value chain into like its component parts, the value drivers, to examine them in more detail. It's like this might involve applying an end-to-end SIPOC to the value chain, or performing a business model canvas of the key suppliers' inputs, processes, outputs, and customers that are part of your organization and drives value. Also maybe analyzing the value added at each stage of the process that contributes to overall shareholder value. And one area I think we overlook a bit is identifying bottlenecks through challenges and sustainability of the various parts of the value chain. Then on the other hand, I suppose the alchemist would perform and craft financial and sometimes non-financial data into increasingly more valuable and productive insights. So for instance, I've talked about the insight productivity frontier. This would involve in fact pushing that frontier outwards, creating more and more value from data generated across the value chain, performing things like Pareto analyses, 80-20 analyses to identify areas where you've got asymmetric returns and you can challenge existing stakeholder assumptions. So by that I mean taking what's looking like it's working and getting everyone else up to that standard. There's also that toying with the power of one model. So that's where you adjust the key drivers by 1% to see what happens, where the biggest bangs for the buck are. And also choosing to compete in analytics. It's a phrase that's been coined nowadays by Tom Davenport, I believe. And that's moving from our traditionally descriptive analysis and analytics to some that are more predictive and perhaps even prescriptive, which means in fact that the business isn't constantly having to come back to finance for guidance. It's already prescribed and it's out there. So these will be very new areas, perhaps, that come about from mixing a few different ingredients, models, methodologies together. Okay, so let's coming back to it then. So what is the best mindset to have, MBA or entrepreneur, if you're working in finance? Well, as someone who's done both, I've run my own business and I've also done an MBA, I can see pros and cons in both. In particular, in the real world, where the entrepreneurs develop their ideas and assets that deliver value to customers. They in effect create customers for a product or service, The MBA could then actually help deconstruct what the entrepreneur's done so it becomes more optimized. They can maintain it and commercialize that value over time. I see this play out on finance in terms of maybe the difference between some of more advisory work versus controllership and compliance. You sort of really need the two. And I suppose the alchemy bit comes on the advisory side where you're mixing loads of different things together to generate new insights for influence and impact. And the compliance and the controllership to bed those in so that they can be maintained and optimized over time. And that's why I think our finance departments would benefit from people having more of a alchemist type approach as well, since I suppose traditionally we've been in that controllership and compliance, that administrative type space, that sort of support, that back office, and the alchemist has to get more towards the front lines. So ultimately the finance team is, as a group, as a function, sustainably developing and delivering leading edge insights that are allowing us to become more influential, get a seat at the table, and delivering an impact and creating value for our organizations and stakeholders. And that's why I bring on guest mentors to our Strength in the Numbers show. Guest mentors who are both alchemists and also administrative MBA types, to share with you their stories, their hard-won lessons, how they've practically figured out to create new approaches or sweat existing ones to contribute even more value for themselves and for their organizations. And ultimately, their advice will help you on how to leverage your strength in the numbers faster so you can have a more fun, rewarding and successful career in accounting and finance. So look, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please let your friends and colleagues know about it. We're on all the major platforms: YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud and Stitcher. Thanks again for watching and listening in. So until next time, take care of yourselves and let's keep on building our strength in the numbers.